Fantastic. Welcome everybody to Accessibility Software for Everyone. My name is Steve Balo, and I'm the Internship and Employment Coordinator with Application Development Program at North Seattle College. You can get a hold of me by my email address directly at the college. You can connect with me on LinkedIn. You can also get a hold of me directly through Meetup through the North Seattle Tech Talks group. Pretty easy to find on there. If you do want to connect on LinkedIn, I just ask that you please drop a note to say how you connected, how you found me. That's very helpful in sifting through various people that want to connect on there. Too far ahead. This is Indigenous Peoples Day, but we always do a land acknowledgement as part of our work here at North. I want to call out that the land that the college is on, the land that I live on as well, is traditional and contemporary territories of the Coast Salish people, specifically the Duwamish tribe. And very often in these meetings, we do a land acknowledgement and we talk about it. What I would like people to do generally is actually kind of go one level deeper. So you can go to duwamishtribe.org to learn about more information about this particular tribe. If you live in this area, you can go to realrentduwamish.org to actually take action. Many of you are from other parts of the country and have other Indigenous groups that are in your area. And I would, today especially, but always say, take a moment to actually go research, learn about it, and take action. I want to give thanks to two event sponsors. First off, Mentors in Tech. They've helped arrange some of our speakers today. This is an organization that it's a first systematic and sustainable mentoring and support program specifically aimed at smaller, lesser well-known colleges and boot camps. Mentors in Tech has been a great partner of North Seattle College, especially in the last year when they sort of really started up the program. We had our first cohort go through there. It was a great program for the students, but it was also really great for the mentors that got involved. So if you are interested in getting involved, there was closing today for the next cohort that starts in November for mentors, but they do open up another cohort in the winter. So you can express interest by going to mentorsintech.com. And if you are at a college that is not yet part of this, you can, I would say, talk to your administrators and your tech programs to have them reach out to the folks at Mentors in Tech to get involved. Right now, they can't take direct applications from students, so you need to be part of a school that is involved. Which brings me to the school that's involved, one of them, which is the one I work for. I've been there for 6 years. It'll be in 6 years in January at North Seattle College. I actually originally worked at Adobe Systems for about 15 years before joining. The application development bachelor's program is a bachelor's completion program. So you come in with 90 credits in either an associate's degree, or you come with a previous bachelor's degree, technical or not. You take some prerequisites and you join our program to map out some computer science fundamentals and then practical hands-on project work in web, mobile, cloud, and data science. I've seen the results. I've seen where students land. I've been able to teach some of the courses in this as well. It's a great program. That's why I continue working with it. And if you're interested, you can reach out to me or you can visit our website below. All right, some quick housekeeping things for our meetup today. We are recording this session. We have a lot of folks that are not able to attend live. We have some of our students that are taking a course right now, actually. So please do mute if you're not speaking at the time, and please do feel free to use the chat pod for questions and comments along the way. I will try to keep an eye on those questions so that we can bring those back up in the Q&A if they don't get answered during the talk. Presenters are free to answer during the talk or wait until the Q&A time. That's up to them. If there are slides, so these slides, for instance, I will be collecting those and sharing them out to all the folks who RSVP'd, and they'll also go to the Mentors in Tech message board where they'll be permanently stored. And last but not least, I will send out a survey along with that information, just so you can kind of tell us what we're doing right, what we can improve going forward. And yeah, I do want to remind folks of our guiding principles for the meetup. These are the 4 I's. This is based on the 3 I's, which I do not remember the source of at the moment. It was information, insight, and inspiration. We've added inclusion to that. Basically, this is 1, you're at a meetup. We hope you learn something and walk away with some skills or knowledge you didn't have before. We hope you feel represented, empowered, and welcome. We know we have some work to do there always. We hope you understand, the insight part is understand the why. So today, you're going to learn this is the way things are. Why are the decisions made? What can we do to change some of those things? And that brings us to the last point, which is inspiration. It's great if you learn about the reason why things are the way they are, the technologies that exist, but what we really want to do is inspire folks to take accessibility and inclusive design seriously and as a baseline. So we hope that you move forward, whether you're technical or not. We hope that you're moving forward and using this in your future work. All right. So our agenda today is very simple. I will stop talking and I will hand things over to Fernanda, Jacqueline, Chris, and Jack. We'll kind of go through in that order. 2 of you at shop can go in any order you wish. And then we'll come back for Q&A and wrap around 7:30 or when we are out of questions, whichever comes first. All right. And the question real quick is where can we view the recording? So I will be posting it to YouTube and then I'll be sending the recording link out to the meetup.com group. I will probably also post it to my feed in LinkedIn as well. Excellent. All right, I'm going to stop sharing and I'm not sure if Fernanda or Jacqueline, I don't know which of you want to go first or who's gonna drive. You're welcome to do so.
Awesome, thank you. Hello everyone, my name is Fernanda Bonin and I am a program manager.
And my name is Jacqueline Gibson and I'm a software engineer. And the 2 of us work on the Accessibility Insights team at Microsoft. And so a little bit about our team. We build free and open source tools to help empower other teams to find and fix accessibility issues, either in their web, Windows, or Android applications. We're both really happy to be here and talk more about accessibility with you this evening. And I know that there are a couple of key questions around accessibility that we want to address. So Fair, how about we do that with an example?
You know I love examples, so let me start sharing. And in my screen, what I'm going to share is a website called the Accessible University. It has a carousel with images, and do let me know if you can see it, please.
So far, so good.
Awesome.
Yes,
so
please.
It has a carousel with images, some submenus, a form to apply, and some text at the bottom.
So, Fair, if this was your first time interacting with this website, do you feel comfortable saying that it's accessible?
I'm not sure. If I didn't know about accessibility, how do I know what does it mean for software to be accessible?
That's a great point. Having an understanding of what makes software accessible versus what makes software inaccessible is important for anyone who wants to work on software. So we should probably get started with the definition. So for software to be accessible, it needs to be usable for people of all backgrounds and abilities. But interestingly enough, developing for all users is where it gets tricky for most developers and their teams. So a lot of times people think of accessibility as something that is not really important because it's only inconveniencing, quote, some people. But this is a pretty horrible way to approach design. This is never okay to exclude a portion of users, however small you think that portion might be. And so in reality, the portion of users who benefit from accessible design, it's not 10%, 15%, even 50%. It's 100%. Every single one of us is going to need accommodations or an accessible feature at one point in our lives. And that can be because we're experiencing either a permanent, a temporary, or situational change in ability. So an example we like to use in our team is the following scenario. So there are users who have only one arm permanently. There are also users who might have sprained or broken their arm, so their arm is currently in a sling. That would be a temporary change in ability. And then there are also some people who happen to be on the web, on their computer, and holding their pet or their baby in one arm. And so that would be a great example of situational change in ability. But no matter which group a user falls in, every single one of them would benefit from being able to navigate a website primarily through keyboard. And so this is a really great example of how anyone, regardless of their background and ability, benefits from inclusive design and putting accessibility first.
That's right, Jacqueline. And I think that takes us to another key question, which is, how do we ensure we are creating accessible and inclusive software? The first thing we need to remember is that accessibility needs to be considered in every step of the process. Just like you cannot add sugar to a cake after you baked it, you cannot just sprinkle accessibility to a product after you build it. Designers need to make sure they are considering accessible colors and patterns and thinking from the ideation of the product, how to ensure it's inclusive of all the different ways people interact with technology. And developers need to code with accessibility in mind and test for accessibility early and often. So going back to our Accessible University site, if I was a developer for this site, one way to test it is using Accessibility Insights for Web. Accessibility Insights for Web is a browser extension, and it has two main workflows. FastPass, that in less than 5 minutes highlights common accessibility issues, and Assessment for a detailed analysis of my accessibility against the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. And that takes me to my last question. Where can I learn more about accessibility? Because one of the things I love about Accessibility Insights is all the rich information it provides me to learn more about accessibility. I don't need to be an expert to test my website and fix common accessibility issues. For example, let's take a couple minutes. I know I have like 10 minutes to talk, so let's run FastPass now. The first thing that happens is that the automated checks powered by Axcore already found a lot of accessibility issues, 23, and highlighted them on my page. And this might feel overwhelming, but it doesn't need to be, because when I expand each one of the failures, I see exactly where the issue is and how to fix it.
That's pretty cool. You know, Fair, one thing that I learned about in my web design classes, and I'm sure any of the students on the call who have done web design classes would agree, is that color choice is one of the most important things that you need to take into consideration when you're building a website. And it's especially important for people who have different vision needs. So I'm curious, can Accessibility Insights help developers with this?
It sure can. In fact, the first issue we have here, it's almost as if we have prepared it, right? It's color contrast. Accessibility Insights here is telling me that there isn't sufficient contrast with the background of my text. And so it might be hard for someone who is colorblind to read this text. And so if I want to learn more about this rule, I can select the more information about color contrast, and it takes me to a website that explains to me why it matters, how to fix it. It even has an example with a pass and a fail. And not only that, it also suggests me a color suggestion, which was actually a contribution from a group of Minty students this summer.
Awesome. So another thing that we talked about a little bit earlier in the presentation was specifically the scenarios, right, with users who are going to be navigating by keyboard. And so is there anything that we can show the students how they can check to make sure sites are accessible for keyboard navigators?
Yeah, the next step in FastPass is called Tapstops. And it has a visualization that shows me how a user using keyboard only and not a mouse will navigate my page. And just like the automated checks, we have all this awesome documentation on how to test and what type of accessibility issues to find. So when I turn it on and start pressing the tab key, I can start seeing some accessibility issues. This first menu didn't receive focus. All these submenus are not receiving focus. The carousel arrows are not receiving focus. There isn't a focus indicator either. And so all of these are accessibility issues that are going to make it very hard, if not impossible, for a user who is using keyboard only to access my website.
That's actually one of my favorite parts of FastPass. So I'm glad we were able to show everyone. So that was FastPass, which is super speedy, super helpful. But I think it would be really great if we could show folks what developers can use if they want to dive in even deeper and learn more about accessibility.
Sounds good. So just as a sneak peek, let me show you all assessment. This is going to be a guided process for checking against accessibility standards. All the requirements in assessment are going to have rich information of why it matters, how to fix it, as well as all the links with detailed information. Sometimes we even add snippets from a user perspective or a video on how users will interact with the product and assistive technologies and why it's important to care about this particular accessibility standard. And so really, you don't need to be an expert to start considering about accessibility when you develop and learning more about how to develop with accessibility in mind.
So with that, thank you everyone for listening and for following along. We hope that this has been a helpful intro to accessibility and inclusive software. Before we finish up, we just wanted to share that Accessibility Insights is open source and completely free. So if you're interested in connecting with our team or even possibly making contributions to our products, you can find us on GitHub or on accessibilityinsights.io. And we'll be happy to answer any other questions you might have during the Q&A. And so we're going to go ahead and hand it off to Chris.
Thank you both very much on that. Just a quick thing, if you could throw in the links to those sites you mentioned in the chat, because I'll make sure to have the chat transcript posted as well. Be great. All right. And then yes,
Okay,
Chris, over to you.
my name is Chris Lona. I specialize in excuse me, creating, designing, and deploying inclusive web design for people with disabilities and everyone else. We endeavor to integrate and include accessibility wherever possible, eliminating the need for technology where possible, so that visitor is not expected to acquire, install, and learn it. So removing those barriers associated with assistive tech. I'm not saying assistive tech is bad by any means. I'm just saying it can potentially provide barriers for people, especially those who are aging, as as I am quickly. Anyway.
Chris, sorry to interrupt real quick. We're having a few issues hearing you on the mic. It's cutting out a little bit. I don't know if you're able to switch to another device.
Yeah, sorry about that. All these tech issues, right? Give me a second.
No worries.
Better?
Much, thank you.
Wonderful. Okay, so for example, we integrate accessibility for people with visual, hearing, mobility, and cognitive challenges into web access. As to software, we don't really have much experience with that, but I'll just describe what we do for people with visual challenges, with the various challenges, hearing, mobility, and cognitive. For web design, for people with visual challenges, there is professional audio, human narration provided and integrated on every site that we design. For people with hearing challenges, the audio is complemented with always accurate text, so that people who have some degree of hearing who want to see the text can do both. Someone with mobility challenges who cannot use a mouse has one key press navigation throughout, no key combinations. Someone with cerebral palsy has uncontrollable movements. Sometimes pressing up to 2 to 3 keys can be a challenge. So we accommodate that by just incorporating one key navigation throughout. With audio instructions, for example, press S to start audio narration, or press 1 to go to About Us, press 2 to go to a contact page, that kind of thing. For people with cognitive challenges, there's a variety of ways people with invisible disabilities can interact with our websites. Again, they can choose to look at just the text or just listen to the audio or use both. And of course, any of those features are available to people without disabilities. I looked at a web page and asked, not how can we add accessibility onto this, but rather, how can we make this more accessible? And so that's kind of it in a nutshell. I can try and share my screen. I've never had much luck with this, so bear with me.
Sounds good.
This is a illustrator view of a website we're just finishing up for a client in Ballard, Ballard Licensing. This is a 13-step walkthrough of the tab renewal process for this client, Ballard Auto Vessel Licensing. Each page has audio. I'd like to see if I can share an actual sample. So please bear with me for a moment while I see if I can't find a better example to share. Thanks for your patience.
And the base website that you run is cldesign.co, correct?
cldesign.co.
Okay, I'm gonna put that in.
Here we go. Let's try this. All right, can everyone see this? Digital inclusion for the 21st century.
Yes, indeed.
All right. So this is an example of what I'm talking about. And I like to think that we provide some equity here, and I'll explain this. So a visitor comes to this page and they see, or maybe not, digital inclusion for the 21st century. They have the choice at this point to, you see I'm circling the T, see the text or play the audio.
Welcome to CL Design, digital inclusion for the 21st.
So in this way, anyone who comes to this site must take an action. If I'm visually impaired, I press S to hear the audio. If I want to see the text, I press T. So this means that whoever comes to this site must take some sort of action to absorb the content. So I'm just going to go to the home page real quick. Oh, that's not good, is it? And I'm going to give you an example of the audio instructions and the one key press navigation.
Welcome to CL Design, digital inclusion for the 21st century.
For information about CL Design, press 1. To learn what real people say about inclusive web and digital design, press 2. For samples of inclusive web...
I won't let the whole thing play. I think you get the idea. So now you can't see it, but I'm interacting with my keyboard. So if I press 1 on my keyboard, it's going to take me to, and again, I'm pressing T on my keyboard. I can also press T on the screen. On a touch screen, I can tap the T to show the text. Same thing. So it's designed to be used, I guess multimodal would be the expression. So we've got touch screens, obviously mobile devices, tablets, phones, and of course computers. So there's multiple ways to interact with any of the functions. So
Welcome to it.
So there is no need for any screen reader assistive technology with this website. However, in order to be inclusive, we have included screen reader infrastructure so that people who use screen readers can use the site in the manner that they're used to using. So that is another way in which we try to be inclusive with our work. Three, our work is a good example of how to include multiple topics. So let's just read this. Press right and left arrow keys to interact with the options. Oh, you can't see it. I'm using my right arrow key.
Accessor brand. Industry, accessibility, Aegis living. Industry, aging. Press P.
And then I would press P on my keyboard to load that page. Or I can also.
American founded bespoke hotels.
And so I think you get
Industry, hospitality. Press P.
I don't want to take up too much of your time. I just kind of want to go over sort of the work we're doing in removing barriers for people and attempting to be. I like to think of it as taking accessibility to the next level, which I perceive as being inclusion. So thanks for your time, and I'm happy to field any questions.
I do want to jump in. There was sort of an assumption that I think everyone knew what a screen reader was and what where they were introduced. No, and that's something that I wanted to bring up at the end, but you brought it up. So talk to me a little bit about this current state of screen readers, where they are as far as the OS level or above, and what they serve.
Sure. Screen reader assistive technology originated in, I believe it was 1986. I believe it was at IBM. Then the web came along and people said, well, how do we make these web pages accessible? Oh, well, let's use that screen reader. But there's certain assumptions that go along with that, to acquire it, install it, and learn it, that not everyone has that ability or even desire. So a screen reader, I'll back up a little, is software that people can install and learn that reads. Well, let's just
Blue Badge Access Awards.
go to, I'll give you a first-hand example.
Back then. Welcome to a brief history of web and digital inclusion.
My name is Robert. I have been asked to be your guide through this section because I provide an authentic voice for standard web and digital inclusion.
So that's the robotic voice of a screen reader. And so someone who needs the screen reader software must acquire it, install it, and learn it before even going online. And then certain websites may or may not have the infrastructure to support it. And then they interact with every page hearing that robotic voice. Some people get used to it. I've never gotten used to it. Quick, you see I'm wearing an eye patch. My camera didn't work for the video portion. My apologies. I had a brain tumor when I was 23 and a senior in an architectural program, which caused me to have double vision, which I wear the eye patch to just see single vision. I made lemonade out of lemons and started with CL design and then doing accessible design. That's the quick story. So as to screen readers, that's still the standard today. And so hopefully that answers your question, Steve, a little bit.
Yeah, that's excellent. Thank you. All right. Thank you very much, Chris. I think we'll hand things off to Jack here. Just
Stop sharing my.
There we go.
Just a moment. Excuse me, just a moment to get going here. And my hope is that folks can see the slide that says software for everyone. Okay, great. Got the thumbs up. Okay. Well, hello. My name is Jack Nikolai. My pronouns are he, him. I'm a senior product manager of accessibility at Adobe. The Adobe accessibility team works with over 70 different products to remediate and develop accessible and inclusive experiences for our customers around the world. I've worked with most of our creative products in the 5 years I've been with Adobe. Currently, I'm focused on Adobe XD, the Creative Cloud desktop application, Adobe Spark, Adobe.com, and a couple of new products that we have in development. In the last year, I've also been involved with the teams building the websites for our Adobe Max Creative Conference and Adobe Summit, which all went virtual in 2020. And in the year before the pandemic, Adobe Max had 14,000 registered attendees. That number jumped to over 200,000 in 2020, making it even more important to offer attendees an accessible experience. So registration for Adobe Max is free and now open. The conference itself begins October 26th, so I encourage you to sign up. A link is provided in the event's in the event website's FAQ section to report any accessibility related issues to our event support team. So I encourage you, if you do attend and you find issues, to report them. We'd love to hear from you. So let's see here. So what does it mean for software to be accessible? Well, as the last speaker today, I assumed that you would probably have already heard some great answers to this question. While there are academic, legal, and technical ways to describe what it means for software to be accessible, I'd like to look at it from a more people-oriented perspective. Software is accessible when it both supports the user and gets out of the way at the same time. So what is software accessibility about? It's about autonomy. For example, mobile applications now allow us to request a ride share, find a bus stop location, and make travel purchases. It's about removing dependencies upon others to access information. Before the web, people who were blind might have relied on someone to read a newspaper to them. Now, screen reader software, which we just talked about, allows them to access those same newspapers and more, right? We have sort of an infinite amount of information we can access on the web now. It's about employment. Access to employment enables autonomy, and we often take for granted the ability to access software in our jobs, to log hours, access benefit information, or request time off. Many of these applications and websites are not accessible, impacting employment and autonomy. We run into this at Adobe, and we work with our software vendors to remediate those products for our employees. It's about connection. Thinking back to the days of AOL, some of you may not be old enough to remember AOL, but I will take that for granted. Having access to the internet opened up a world to many people because they didn't have to travel any further than their home computers to communicate with others. So if you were someone with a mobility disability, for example, you were now able to reach out and communicate with others more easily. Another example that comes to mind is the first time I attended the CSUN conference, which is an accessibility conference, encountering people who were blind using a Braille Bluetooth connected keyboard to respond to emails and text messages while they were at the conference. And it's about privacy, that a person can fully access their Social Security account or medical records means that they don't have to ask for assistance and potentially risk the misuse of their private data. It's about creative expression. There's a well-known commercial from Apple, which you can look up on YouTube, and it's about a woman, Sadie, who is a person with limited mobility who uses single switch devices on either side of her head to edit video software. At Adobe, my goal is to enable users from a variety of backgrounds to be able to use our creative software and to unlock their creativity. So what are moral, ethical, and legal implications to accessible and inclusively designed software? So I think of morals as being centered around people. Many people who work in accessibility are driven by a feeling of moral obligation to advocate for the accessibility community. I work at Adobe because I feel compelled to make our creative software accessible to anyone who wants to be a creator. This feeling of moral obligation motivates me and factors into the decisions I make at my job. So morals are often the basis of ethics, and ethics and legal implications are related, considering laws may have been written because of ethical rules already in place in our society. Sometimes this can be the reverse. Laws like the ADA become a forcing factor for people, businesses, and institutions to follow rules and provide accommodations for people with disabilities. The fact is, most of the web is inaccessible. It's often the threat of legal action that forces otherwise unwilling companies to provide accommodations on their website or in their software and mobile applications. This unwillingness is often based on some common themes of lack of knowledge, thinking it will take too much time and money, or that it is really someone else's problem. In my experience, companies who do the best work regarding accessibility and inclusivity are first motivated by their morals, second, their ethics, third, the financial implications, and fourth, the threat of legal action. A product like the mobile application called Be My Eyes is a good example of the intersection of a lot of what I've been talking about. Created as a tool to assist blind and low vision people with everyday tasks, it increases users' autonomy. I suspect from the origin story of the company that it was created from a moral-centered place. From a financial perspective, though, still, the company also collects, anonymizes, and sells usage data to companies like Adobe to help inform them about where users are encountering barriers in their products. So next, what are things that designers and developers can do to make their software accessible and inclusive? I think it starts with education. The most common reason I hear from individual contributors is that they didn't make something accessible because they lacked the education about accessibility. There are lots of resources out there, but how do you start? Diving straight into the web content accessibility guidelines can be daunting. So I would suggest a site like webaim.org, and it can be a great place to start. And I'll include a link in the resources. So then communicate and plan together. One of the challenges we actively work on at Adobe is the communication gap, which commonly occurs between designers and developers regarding accessibility. One of the ways we address that challenge is the use of an accessibility annotation system we call Blue Lines. Other companies like Microsoft and Google have developed their own versions as well. We have found that by documenting accessibility considerations in design specs, engineers are more likely to code accessible experiences. Efforts like Teach Access, which is a program to bring accessibility into education spaces, to make students knowledgeable about accessibility as they progress into the workforce, are introducing accessibility earlier into the education process. Next, talk to people in the disability community. Often we don't even know or realize that we know someone with a disability. Hearing directly from someone with a disability will teach you more than any book or online reference. And then finally, focus on the user journey. Look for potential roadblocks along the way. Does the user have the right context at each step to understand where they are and what to do next? And so finally, where can folks learn more about software accessibility? I mentioned WebAIM earlier. I've included links here in the deck, which I think will be distributed after. LinkedIn Learning has a great UX Foundations series with a section on accessibility that I think is very approachable. Udacity as well has a web accessibility course that gets a little technical. So I still think it's pretty approachable, but it gets into a bit more of the nitty-gritty technical pieces of web accessibility. IBM has a great section on their accessibility site called the Equal Access Toolkit, and it talks about not just kind of the technical things around accessibility, but also how to bring accessibility into your organization, how to plan for it, how to develop features, say from a product management perspective, with accessibility in mind. So it's a great resource. And then finally, a course by the W3C called edX. So thank you.
Fantastic. All right. So thank you, Jack. So first I want to open it up. I didn't see any more questions to the chat thread yet. I'm going to start things. Oh, there we go. We've got one right away for Chris. Question is this app? Go ahead.
Application tested by real impaired persons who have a. Yes, may I share my screen real quick?
Sure thing. So the question is about whether the application that Chris had shown is tested by folks with impairments, with visual and hearing impairments. Yeah. And then what information about the success rate of the design in real-time testing.
Rather than speak about it, I'll let someone else speak about it.
Keiko. Keiko M, rail instructor.
What we as blind and visually impaired people need is companies like CL Design simplifying how we access the web, which everyone else takes for granted. I myself use screen reader software to access programs on my computer. Trying to go online and look for information on websites with it is tedious and time-consuming. Coupled with the added burden of having to learn navigation commands for the screen reader just to get the information, makes it very challenging for a not-so-computer literate person like me, and persons who are new to blindness. What I like about Chris's work is how it tells me what I need to do, and then I just press one key to get where I need to go. The human voice narrated presentations are pleasant, and a nice change from the robotic voice of the screen reader. It guides me every step of the way, which eliminates endless and tedious searching for information I am looking for. I would encourage any organization to add these types of presentations to their website, so that more people can be included online. As a customer, I would be more likely to buy from a company that cares enough to make my online experience easy and pleasant.
Keiko M, rail instructor. To hear this in
Hopefully that answers the question sort of almost firsthand from an actual customer, client, a supporter, if you will. So if I can answer any more details, let's see, success rate. The success rate varies, but overall we've always had wonderful response from people with disabilities, as they really like various aspects of the presentations, as you just heard. People with mobility challenges and other challenges have had, of course, different feedback, but it's usually pretty positive. So hopefully that answers the question.
Thank you very much, Chris. Yeah, that brings me to a question, the success rate idea. And this is a hard thing to answer, but maybe, I don't know if Fernando or Jacqueline, about fall off. So if you have folks that are, going to go to an experience, mobile app or a website, but they feel that there's impediments and they're not willing to or able to work through using these complicated additional software or something like that. And I don't know if that's part of your user testing at a high level, or hopefully it's part of the design process to think about these things. But how do you think about that and design for that kind of fall off? That makes sense.
I may ask if you can elaborate a little bit about it, please.
Sure. So in traditional web parlance, when you have folks that go and they say they are searching for a particular product, they go to a site. As they go, if you make it more difficult as they go, to find what they want, they'll leave and go somewhere else. When you're designing for accessibility, it's not like the the customer is going to necessarily have a way to tell you. So one, is there a way that the customer can tell you in your pieces of software or websites, and how do you make that possible? Two, what is the action that you can that your team does about it, I guess. And this, I would go for Jack as well. If I'm encountering an accessibility issue firsthand or secondhand, what is it that they can do, and how does action actually get taken?
Got it. That is a great question. Thanks for the additional details. So definitely one thing to consider when you're creating anything, and if you're not doing it accessible, it's almost as if you told like every fourth or fifth person, I don't want your business, because that's exactly what's going to happen when you don't design an accessible and inclusive product. One way to consider creating accessible and inclusive products, especially in the industry, is ensuring you have inclusive and diverse workforces, where everyone can bring different points of views, different perspectives, and different ways and abilities to do things, because that's one of the best ways to consider from the beginning how to develop more inclusive product. And then, of course, since the beginning, and I'll keep saying it, you don't sprinkle accessibility at the end. You need to consider accessibility every step of the process. And as much as you can, if you can talk with the community, and this is something great with accessibility insights being open source, let the community give you feedback, share your ideas early and often, and get feedback from users with different abilities to understand what's working and what's not working. Within our team, we have a very lengthy process where we go through each one of the designs as a team together, and we talk about all the different considerations, not only technical, but also in accessibility, because it's important to consider accessibility since the very beginning on the ideation.
May I interject something?
Please.
There's something called abandonment rates when it comes to assistive technology, and hearing aids are a form of assistive technology. And when statistic has abandonment rates of hearing aids at 75%, so that's kind of representative of perhaps other abandonment of assistive tech. If you manage to integrate and include the assistive tech without the user knowing it's there, the abandonment rate goes to 0. So that's all I wanted to say.
That's great. So I have some questions that I did have pre-submitted from some folks as well, but we got someone in the chat first. Hardware requirements. What are minimum hardware requirements, and are there issues in that?
Can you clarify, Steve, or what do they mean by that?
I'm wondering if they mean with the particulars of the assistive technologies that you were showing, but this does come into play when you're talking about if you're designing a piece of software for particular operating systems. There are built-in assistive software that you might be relying on that may or may not actually exist, and therefore, that's again that abandonment rate.
Okay, there's no minimum hardware requirement at all, and it has not been an issue. So there's a short answer. If you have a browser, you can access our work.
Okay. We have a question from Don. As a software engineer, I'm working on a product that doesn't have accessibility built in. Where should we start?
This is Jack. I'll jump in on that one. So I think, frankly, I think learning, let's see here, you're a software. So I'm wondering if the product, Dawn, if the product is web-based or desktop-based, or even mobile for that matter. But frankly, I think learning where your product is now and getting an understanding of what kind of work is ahead of you is a great place to start, rather than kind of just barreling in and trying to do accessibility work. I think taking stock of the condition of your product today. And that could be, if it's a web property, using a great product like Adobe or Accessibility Insights, or products by DQ, which is also the maker of the Axe core. That's kind of the root of Accessibility Insights, as I understand it. And so using some tooling to actually kind of audit your product to understand what kinds of issues it has, and kind of the quantity. I mean, this is me coming at it from the perspective of a product manager. I want to know, are most of the issues keyboard based, or are there a bunch of design things that are an issue if it's contrast, and tackle those first, so that you can kind of provide the most impact sooner, rather and kind of prioritize what your findings are. I think, beginning to build in accessibility tooling into your engineering process. Again, Accessibility Insights being one of the pieces in that puzzle, but DQ has their Axe core that's can be integrated into your actual engineering process. As you do builds, it will check, versus having to wait to go into the browser. And I think, really it begins also that process of education. And so going to websites like webaim.org, or taking a look at the web accessibility training that I'll provide the link for you to begin to build up a basic knowledge of accessibility, a basic vocabulary around it. So as you begin to get feedback from tools like Accessibility Insights, you kind of understand what to do with those, what to do with that feedback. So.
I agree, Jack. I think that's very well said. And I would also add, if I may, analyzing or assessing where you are now and what you'd like to learn and being educated, in addition to perhaps strategically thinking about where you'd like to take it in the future, because it's going to evolve. And I would just add that in, so that you might have an idea of where you want to take it, and keep that in mind as well. And by the way, shout out to Adobe. I use all those products. Creative Suite and my accessibility examples were created with Animate.
All right, thank you. Going back to the questions, are there web standards for disability features, was the question, leading question. And what are they?
Yeah, so I mean, the two that we pay most attention to, well, there's really three actually, that we pay most attention to at Adobe. The first being the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, or WCAG, or it's also pronounced WCAG. And the latest version of that standard is 2.1. There are 3 levels for the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines: single A, which is the most rudimentary, double A, which is essentially considered industry standard, and then triple A, which is I always describe it as being kind of aspirational. And so at Adobe, our internal accessibility standard is based on WCAG 2.1, as well as Section 508, which is a federal law around requiring government and educational institutions that receive, and other institutions that receive federal funding, to choose the most accessible software when they make purchases. So if a federal agency is purchasing, let's say, Outlook for their email, or looking around for different products for their email, they need to prioritize choosing the most accessible product in the market. And then finally, of course, now that I want to say it, I'm blanking on it. There is an international, like, European standard, which is based on WCAG 2.1, or WCAG actually 2.0, but I think they're upgrading to 2.1. And so there is a similar standard in Canada, and one, I believe, in Australia as well. Yeah, so there's a variety of standards. Most of them are kind of based around the WCAG standards. So if you're going to start somewhere by learning especially web accessibility standards, but really the WCAG guidelines can be kind of broadly applied to software development, whether that's desktop or mobile as well. So I would start there.
EN 301549 is the one for the European.
Yes, thank you.
Bunch of random numbers. So.
Yeah, thanks.
And that kind of actually answered a little bit on the federal regulation and guideline that the same person was asking about. This is a question more of for those of us who are maybe working on teams where we have to push a little. I'd love some examples of how to get around that, but we don't have time for accessibility at orgs that don't necessarily have they're not allocating their resources properly. I'll put it that way. I don't think most of the folks here are in those organizations, but maybe you've dealt with teams or had to make the arguments before to provide some guidance.
Show them their ROI.
Okay. So go after return on investment.
And they'll start to pay attention.
Okay, so that's a business case.
Right, and the number of people with disabilities and those that you're excluding by not having a disability. And I think businesses are in business to generate revenue. I mean, we have the social responsibility aspect, and that's very important, of course. However, my experience has been the more return on investment and revenue generation you can show and bring, the more traction your accessibility efforts will get.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think that being able to make a good business case for your customers, and if possible, to do research and bring in customer insights. Many companies I have found, and certainly this is true within Adobe, is the customer feedback goes a long way. And if you can find customers that are trying to use your products and failing, which ultimately means they can't spend their money with you, you should bring that to the attention of your company. And I think that the other thing that I wanted to say about that is, and I brought this up earlier, which is really about education. I've sort of, one of the ways that I've sort of gotten people to do accessibility sort of through the back door, so to speak, is through education about accessibility and inclusive design. Because once people just start to think about it as a part of their job, it doesn't so much become extra time, it's just the time that you spend. And so by making, as a designer, let's say, as I'm designing something, making considerations about contrast and choosing colors at that time that support good contrast is just a part of the everyday task that I have. And the net effect is that, it's not a problem I've got to solve down the line when it's already being developed. Same thing with developers. If they're writing good semantic HTML, if they are considering tab order and keyboarding, like, simple things like that are often the most common places that software really falls down. And frankly, they're some of the easiest things to do up front and just get it right then, rather than often, which is 10 times as much time to remediate later.
Awesome. We have a question on how do you test for accessibility? Do you folks have accessibility testers? And dedicated is the implied nature there.
So I can speak to that on behalf of our team, Accessibility Insights. So yes to both. We test for accessibility as developers. So every single PR that we put out on our team, we test to see if there are any accessibility issues introduced. And before that can be merged in, those accessibility issues need to be addressed. Additionally, we run regular accessibility checks on our products before we release them to the public. So we have that extra fail-safe there. And we also have accessibility testers within Microsoft who go ahead and do regular audits of our products and help us out with that as well. So lots of accessibility testing.
Excellent. All right. This is a question, and we've got some folks that will view this here that are instructors. If you're an instructor and you're teaching interactive development, whether it's web or mobile or desktop, how do you kind of model the best behavior from the start? Like, how do you set folks up so that this is just part of it? If you were to give advice.
Sorry, Steve, could you restate the question? You were cutting out a little bit and I didn't quite catch it.
Sorry about that. If you are an instructor and you're trying to, work with students getting into interactive development for the first time, so, fresh start, haven't gone into mobile, haven't gone into web, and they're getting started with this, how do you model this as part of what you normally do? We take it for granted that testing is part of the starting of software development. You teach folks to test, and that's just part of it. Why? I don't want to speculate on why accessibility isn't there yet, but how would we start to sort of integrate that and model that better than we were evidently doing so far?
This is Jack. Yeah, I think that certainly, as I was saying, education is a part of it. I mentioned in the talk earlier, Teach Access, which is a program to bring accessibility into education, particularly starting in college, so that it's just a part of curriculum. And so I think that that's certainly one way to, I'm not sure if model is quite the right word, but to start to bring that into people's consciousness as early as college, so that as they go into the workforce, accessibility isn't a new thing for them. And they already have some idea about what the responsibilities are, what the guidelines are. And I think, when I teach, it really, sometimes I'm teaching, sort of a general accessibility course, or I'm teaching something about our accessibility annotation system like Blue Lines. And I think really it's just, often it's about showing examples. And like, I believe it was Chris earlier was doing, walking us through the experience. I think, actually, or frankly, actually bringing in someone, and I know that Microsoft does this as well, actually bringing people in who have different disabilities, and showing, like, asking them to actually interact with software and to see where they are successful, or where they are finding barriers. It can be some of the most educational experiences. Or another sort of similar to that would be having people sit in on usability testing, and have an audience of people with disabilities. And so I think those can be really great ways to kind of show and model what you want people to be able to do, and what your people should be aspiring to develop for.
I could weigh in as well. My background is in architecture, and this was shortly after the ADA. We were taught to include ramps from the get-go. We didn't know any other way. So if you're talking tabula rasa with accessibility, and you're an educator, you're teaching all of these things that may have existed in the past, and now you have this extra thing that just is part, as you say, part of the curriculum, part of what they learn as their education. And so then it starts to become integrated and included, which is sort of my big deal.
Yes, coming back to the point of it, it is not something to fix or add on later.
Correct.
Being a big underline.
Exactly.
Excellent. We have a question here. As a student, I say it is our responsibility to bring it up. I know many instructors at a high-level college course are willing to model. Okay, a comment rather than a question. That's excellent. Yes. Yeah, and I take it to this, what Jacqueline said about, as part of merging in a pull request, you make sure it doesn't have bugs. Well, non-functioning is a bug. It's pretty bad. So, so not being accessible is pretty straightforward when you have an understanding of what that means.
Exactly.
All right. Well, if we don't have any other questions, what I would like to ask of our speakers is just really one thing that, as maybe a developer or designer or a prospective developer designer, what is one thing that those people can do tomorrow that will make them a more accessible, a better champion for accessibility? They can just do one thing tomorrow, what would it be?
I think as a student, if you have one thing to do tomorrow is start thinking about accessibility next time you build a project. As we were talking about how the teacher teaches you about accessibility, I was a student some years ago, and I won't say how many. And I remember building a calculator, because that's something everyone makes you do. You have to build a calculator. And we have to demo it in front of the class with a very old projector. And because I didn't know about accessibility, I didn't know how important it was to think about colors, no one could see my calculator in the projection. And it really doesn't need to be something complex once you understand how important it is to do all those things, like having accessible colors, like ensuring there's keyboard navigation. Start with something small. I'm gonna start thinking about color next time I design something. Now I'm gonna start thinking about keyboard and start building that knowledge. So when you become a designer or a software developer, you have all that knowledge built in to bring forward to your new team or your new company.
Go find a blindfold, put it on, and try and use the web. You can do that tomorrow.
I would say something that was really helpful to me when I was a student was consistently asking myself when I started projects, how would someone of different background or with a different set of abilities than me interact with this? Because I think that the first couple of years that I was studying computer science, I was just really focused on the technical aspect, like, can I get this done? Can I make this project? Can I put something out there? How efficient is it? And all of that. But it wasn't until the middle of my undergrad time, and actually, ironically, when I started Accessibility Insights as an intern, that I really started thinking about taking a step back just from the technical, can it be done? And thinking about, why are we doing this? How are we doing this? And how is this going to affect other people? And so that's like a little bit of a meta thing to do as a student, but I think it's something that's really, really helpful, and it's going to make you a better developer. It's going to make you a more inclusive developer. And it's one of the most important shifts in mindset, I would say, for my career. And the earlier you can do it, definitely the better.
In all seriousness, I would say also too, we all know someone who, most people I know someone with a disability. Could be an elder or colleague, friend, etc. Ask them what their experience is like when they try and use software and digital products. And you'll get a variety of answers. And that might inform your, moving forward in terms of how you perceive and look at or interact with accessibility and inclusion.
Yeah, it seems like most of the people that I know, including myself, come to work in accessibility because they know someone, maybe a family member or a friend that's kind of inspired them, or they themselves have a disability. And so I think definitely meeting and talking to people, as I mentioned in my talk earlier, I think is really key. I think, this is going to sound really simple, but personally, I think just put away your mouse and try to navigate a website with a keyboard. There's going to be a few key things that you're going to find out. You're going to find out, can you get to everything? You're going to find out, does something receive keyboard focus, and can you tell? Does it show, does a link now have or do, let's say, just say a menu item have a blue box around it, which is kind of the browser default, or is it navigating through the web page and you just can't tell where the focus even is, which is just a really common problem. And so just put the mouse away, start to use your tab key, and see if you can even get through all of the tasks that are available on a single page. I think you'll find that a lot of sites fall down just with that simple task. And keyboard interaction is really kind of the basis. It's the basis of screen reader use as well. And so you're going to benefit a variety of different users. You're actually going to also in some regards, like help people who use things like Dragon Naturally Speaking. So it has a lot of different implications. If you're supporting keyboard, you're going a long way to supporting a variety of different users.
I would add, do all those things on your phone, or try all the things that Jack just mentioned. We live in the desktop, laptop, mobile phone, tablet world, and so the complexities of accessibility get compounded within that, right? And so the usability of desktop accessibility versus when with the convenience of our phone is another, topic. And so the challenge is, how do we address all these contexts for accessibility?
All right. Right, I have another question. And this is for folks that are extremely excited and focused on accessibility. Where can they go and work and focus on that? Like, how do you get to the positions that you all are in to focus on that as a full-time focus, rather than, yes, I'm a developer and of course I'm incorporating it in everything I do. This is my lifeblood. I want to do this all the time.
I'd give a shout out to Microsoft. What's the mission statement? Empowering everyone in the world to achieve more along those lines. And I think they walk the walk when it comes to that.
Thank you. Definitely, that's the mission of Microsoft: empower every person and every organization in the planet to achieve more. And if we are not empowering people with disabilities, we're not living up to that mission. I was one of those persons who was really, really passionate about accessibility. And by the end of my college career, I knew I wanted to work on accessibility. So I will say, look for those opportunities to research about it, go to conferences, connect with people, look for openings. I know that we have 2 openings in accessibility insights for a software engineer 2 and a senior. So there are always openings in teams around accessibility, and keep learning more, because that's also what's going to differentiate you from other candidates.
I would also say that if you are an intern at a company and you don't happen to be placed on accessibility focused team, just like what everyone else was sharing, right? Network, be able to connect with those teams and see, hey, next summer, do you think you'd have an opening for an intern? Or if I come back full time, do you have an opening for a software engineer or a program manager? You'd be surprised how many times those teams are like, we didn't have space for an intern this summer, but we are looking to hire some people full time. And I've had a couple of friends who work in the accessibility space, and that's how they actually landed their first positions. So definitely do that. Anecdotally, our intern for this last summer, we were able to find him because he tweeted at us and he said that it was his dream to work on these products. And so we saw it, we worked on it, and we made it a reality. And he's coming back full time as a software engineer next year on our team. So networking, it's fun.
Wow, great.
Yeah, I think that, accessibility can take a lot of different forms. I've met people who, do accessibility, for example, at the University of Washington. There's a whole group there that does accessibility work for, their websites, their intranet, that sort of thing. Before coming to Adobe, I was working for Starbucks in their corporate IT division. I was working originally as a front-end development lead on adobe.com, where accessibility was important. And so it was really where I started to really cut my chops in terms of accessibility, and worked on the mobile application as well. Before really just seeing a job posting about the role that I'm in now at Adobe. And so I think, you definitely keep your eyes peeled. I mean, I get job alerts all the time from LinkedIn, which is a great resource. And so, definitely get hooked up with one of those searches as well. And I think, just put yourself out there in the community. I think there is a local meetup that's an inclusion and accessibility and inclusive design meetup here in Seattle that I think is a good resource as well to get connected and start talking to people.
Excellent. All right. Well, it looks like our question well is dried up. So I just want to thank Jacqueline, Chris, Jack, and Fernanda very much for coming on here virtually tonight and sharing with us. And yeah, so please feel free again to stay connected to the meetup. You can connect to me, and we do try to build things on, so we won't be dropping accessibility. If the next topic is not about it, it will be included as part of that. So thank you very much for your comments, your questions, and the information you shared today. And I will send out this recording and the chat transcript. And if any of our speakers, if you have links you want me to include in the messaging, just send me that by Wednesday, and I'll make sure to get it out to everybody. All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Steve. Thanks to everyone.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.